Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. So for a long time on stream now, guys, you guys have been asking me for my level cap Void Cascade Titania build. And when I say level cap, I do mean level cap, as in level 10,000 enemies, because Titania is able to absolutely obliterate level 10,000 enemies. It's not the only frame that can do that, but again, you guys have been asking me for this. Now, it's nothing brand new. I did not create this build out of the depths of my imagination. The Zada's Whisper Blast Innervate build for Titania is basically the most popular build for Titania, but a lot of you still don't know about that, or you don't, know how it works or why it's so good. So I'm here to show you the version of it that I use and why it's so good and how it's able to, again, obliterate level 10,000 Thrax, for example, in Void Cascade. So let's go ahead and hop into that. First of all, we'll talk about the Archon Shards. The nice thing about this frame and how insanely strong it is that basically none of these Archon Shards are really mandatory. The only shard that I have on that I would highly recommend that you keep on is the casting speed shard, because it does feel nice to have that extra bit of casting speed, because you are going to be doing a fair bit of ability casting on this build, primarily the Zada's Whisper for the purposes of shield gating, which we'll discuss later on. Now, the other shards that I do have on that you 100% do not need, and I have run level cap without them, is right now I have 2 ability strength shards on for an extra 30% strength, and I have 1 emerald shard for 15% ability damage on enemies affected by corrosive status, and the other emerald shard is toxin status effects deal plus 45% more damage. Now, typically you would not be able to benefit from both toxin and corrosive on the same build, or on the same weapon, at least, but we'll talk about how you are able to do that on Titania later on in the mission here, or in the video rather. Now, taking a look at the actual Titania build, as you can see, it's a whole lot of duration and a good amount of strength. Now, it says 185% strength here, but the actual amount of strength that the 4th ability has is 275%, thanks to the fact that we're using Precision Intensify, which says plus 90% ability strength for your 4th ability. So my 1st, 2nd, and 3rd abilities have 185% strength, but again, the 4th ability, which is the bread and butter of Titania Razor Wing, actually has 275% ability strength. The arcanes that I'm using are Pistolier, which gives you the occasional infinite ammo for pistols, which Titania's, Exalted Secondary Dex Pixia does count as a secondary. So when this goes off, you have infinite Pixia, which is amazing because the fire rate can get to the point where it's absolutely insane. So when you combine absurd fire rate with infinite ammo, you get absurd DPS. And then Arcane Precision is on headshot. I just unequipped it on accident. My bad. Let's go ahead and put that back on. Arcane Precision is on headshot plus 300% damage for 18 seconds on secondary weapons. So again, a secondary weapon buff. And yes, this 300% base damage will apply to her Exalted Secondary Dex Pixia. You don't have to run this. If you don't have this extra bit of 300% damage, you are still going to obliterate enemies at level cap. So if you want to swap this out, you can. I just haven't really needed anything else on the build, so I kept it on because more damage funny, I suppose. Now, in terms of the actual build here, we are basically entirely surviving off of her innate evasion, because if you look at Razor Wing, when you are in a Razor Wing, you have 50% base evasion, and if you're constantly just moving around as well, it also makes enemies harder to hit on top of that. So half the shots coming in won't hit you in the first place, so you won't have to shield gate as constantly as some other frames using catalyzing shields, but we are using catalyzing shields, and we are triggering catalyzing shields with brief respite. Now, again, just to go over how catalyzing shields actually works, regardless of how it's supposed to work, what catalyzing shields actually does is that if you restore any amount of shields, whether it be your full shield value or a single point of shield, it gives you that full 1.33 seconds catalyzing shield gate duration. So with brief respite, all we have to do is basically tap Zada's Whisper whenever we want to get our shield gate back, and you're back to being totally invulnerable. So between the evasion and the very easy gating uptime, it is incredibly easy to stay alive at level cap. Now, the rest of these mods, again, it's mostly just a bunch of duration and strength. As you can see, we don't care about efficiency here, and I actually have negative range. Now, negative range, the only time this might be annoying is if you want to actively keep up your tribute buffs constantly, because you will have to get closer to the enemy to cast the, like the shadow on them that you grab. But a lot of times I don't even worry about keeping these up, even though they are technically good. Now, the main ones that you care about are Thorn, Dust, and Entangle. The Full Moon Companion buff is completely irrelevant for Titania herself, at least, basically. The Thorn's damage reduction can be useful in lower level missions, but of course, if you're going to level cap, like the gameplay you're about to see in a moment here, damage reduction does not do anything. You're either dead, you either have all of your health or you're dead in one shot if you actually take damage past your shield gate. So thorns doesn't really matter in the long run. The two that actually continue to be helpful is dust, which gives the enemies in your dust range minus 50% hit chance. So again, that basically functions as evasion. So if you stack dust with your innate evasion, that effectively gives you 75% evasion, because if you have a 50% chance to dodge and enemies have a incoming 50% chance to miss you, then those are multiplicative factors to each other and essentially functions as a 75% evasion rating. So you will dodge 3/4 of incoming projectiles. And then Entangle gives enemies minus 25% speed, which you can kind of view as a minus 25% DPS modifier on them. Now the other abilities, the real bread and butter here is Razor Wing plus Zada Whisper. Razor Wing is already a decent ability, but when you take Zada's Whisper and you add Blast onto her Dex Pixia, you get some insane interactions. So the last thing to go over here is why I'm using Archon Continuity before you go to the Dex Pixia build. So why am I using Archon Continuity instead of Prime Continuity? Well, the Dex Pixia build is Blast and Toxin, as you're about to see in a moment here. And since it is a ability, even though you mod as a weapon, it's still her 4th ability. Since it's a ability that procs Toxin, that means that it also gives you free corrosive procs. So you get the occasional free armor strip as you're shooting the enemy. So it's just a free damage increase, essentially. Now let's go look at the actual Dex Pixia build here. Oh, actually, my bad. One more thing to note. Make sure that you keep self-casting Spellbind. If you hold cast, like if you long cast Spellbind and actually cast it on yourself, and it gives you status immunity for the whole duration, including knockback. So if you run into walls as you're flying around as Titania, you won't get that knockback effect, and enemies won't be able to proc anything on you like heat or viral or whatever, so it's very useful at keeping you alive and keeping you moving. Now for the actual Dex Pixia build. So this is a Blast Magnetic Toxin build. Again, the Toxin is just added on here so that we can also trigger the free corrosive proc. And again, that does help give us more stacks for galvanized shots, so that's very useful. Now, why did I go with Blast being the main element? Blast has a real funky interaction with Zada's Whisper, where when you shoot an enemy, Zada's Whisper says that it replicates your damage basically. So right now, it's doing 48% of my total weapon damage as an additional pure void damage hit. This actually triggers again on blast detonations. So if I shoot an enemy doing 100 damage, for example, you would think that I would also do 48 void damage. And then the blast, if I, procced blast, the blast proc would go off and do however much damage that does. Now I say you would think that you would do 48% void damage because there's actually a lot of weird mathematical interactions with Zod's Whisper where it scales much higher than it's supposed to. For example, it's affected by Bane multipliers multiple times because Zod's Whisper is viewed as a separate damage instance. And it actually dips, I believe, 3 times on blast proc interactions. So again, what actually happens with blast procs is that you shoot an enemy, you deal the upfront hit damage, you proc and you also proc the Zada's Whisper, which hits them a second time for your percent of weapon damage. But then if you land a blast proc as well, the blast proc goes off doing the blast damage. But blast detonations, when the blast proc actually expires and detonates, that counts as another weapon hit, and Zada's Whisper will again trigger on the enemy, and you'll get a secondary, basically free additional Zada's Whisper hit. Now you would think that it would be doing, for example, in this case, 48% of the blast procs damage. That's incorrect though. It actually still scales off of your fully modded weapon damage. So it does a lot more damage than it's kind of supposed to in that scenario. And if you have any faction multipliers on your weapon, or if you're running Roar, for example, or maybe even the Relay Blessing, the 25% damage blessing, because I think that's actually coded as a faction multiplier, that can dip multiple times on Zada's Whisper, which again makes it just do a hilarious amount of damage, and I'm not even benefiting from that on this build. So if you want to make the numbers you see even more insane, you can do that. So again, Blast plus Zada's Whisper is insane. We also have the classic Blast plus Innervate combination here. Innervate is scaled faster by Blast as well, again because when Blast procs detonate, they count as another time delayed hit, so it actually gives you another stack of Innervate, so you rapidly get orange crits easily on Titania, and even occasional red crit due to that blast interaction. That's fantastic. So Magnetic I have on here, you'll notice that I'm not using Lethal Torrent. I actually dropped Lethal Torrent for Magnetic Might because I found the value of adding Magnetic to actually be higher, especially for the specific use case of doing Void Cascades where you're shooting Thrax, and the Thrax all have Overguard. Magnetic allowing you to do up to over quadruple damage to Overguard plus the extra crit damage in my opinion, is better value than Lethal Torrent, especially because really the only thing we're losing from Lethal Torrent is the 60% multi-shot, because the fire rate is almost entirely irrelevant due to the fact that we are using Razorwing Blitz on Titania, which I think I actually forgot to go over. This augment gives you 25% flight speed and fire rate to Pixia for a duration stacking up to 4 times. So at base, this gives you 100% flight speed and 100% fire rate, basically. And this scales with power strength. So on this version of the build, this is doubled to over 200% in total fire rate and flight speed. And then that's before Void Corruption and Nidus Specters and Matter Eye Sling Strength and whatever other strength buffs you might want to snapshot onto this. So it gives you a insane amount of fire rate and flight speed, which again, that insane fire rate is why Pistolier is nice, because you won't run out of ammo as fast. Or the magazine, rather. It has infinite ammo, of course. So that's pretty much it for describing the build here. In terms of the other weapons, they really don't matter at all. I actually don't use any other weapons on Titania except for my melee. You would think that you could benefit from putting the Augur mods on your secondary and not have to run an Augur mod or Brief Respite on the Titania, but your weapons actually count as being deactivated when you're in her 4th, so that actually does not work. So the only melee I actually bring is the Dark Split Sword to benefit from the odd interaction where this weapon does not get corrupted in Fixture missions. So if you only bring the Dark Split Sword, only your Warframe gets corrupted when you pick up Reactant, including Titania, so you will get constant corruptions on Titania as you're going through something like a Void Cascade. Now, I know I didn't show a Dewata build. This melee is completely useless. You're never going to use this melee, so do not worry about this. The Companion is also whatever you want to use. It's usually just my parents. Now let's hop into some gameplay here, some pre-recorded gameplay that I have of a Void Cascade, just so that you can see the insane numbers in kill time that this has against literal level cap enemies. Record on here. Capturing a little bit of gameplay right now. I already captured some level cap gameplay, but I'm just going to grab some more just to make sure I have whatever usable footage I need. Yeah, I mean, it's just disgusting how good this is. All right, that should be good. So as you can see, the damage that she puts out, even at level cap, against those level 10,000 Thrax, is basically instantaneous kill time. Now, that was my bad on showcasing her potential survivability, because I forgot that there was a Revenant on that team. So in that specific clip, I actually happen to have Mesmer on me from the Mesmer sharing augment. But I can promise you, in all other circumstances, when I've gone to level cap with no defensive frames buffing me, I basically never go down, because literally all you have to do is tap 3 and you trigger an instant 1.33 seconds of invulnerability from your catalyzing shield gate. And again, much of the time that doesn't happen anyway due to your evasion rating and reducing enemies' hit chance and just flying around. You just simply don't get hit most of the time. But again, you do not need the Mesmer that I forgot I had in that video in order to stay alive. In every other case, if you hop by my streams, for example, when I go to a Cascade, you'll see me very easily both obliterating enemies and staying alive in Cascade. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this Titania video. I still gotta get that Zaku build out. I know that because people are also asking for my Zaku Cascade setup, because he's another frame that absolutely shreds at Cascade and does insane damage, stays alive super easily, all the goods. So I'm still gonna work on that at some point, but hopefully you guys get good use out of this build. If you have any other ideas or like ways you think you might change this build or make it even better, or whatever you might think, you could drop it down in the comments below. I always look forward to reading you guys' comments and feedback and whatnot. Hopefully you found it useful, hopefully you found it educational, and I will see you guys in the next one.